Matthew, 5th chapter, part of the Sermon on the Mount. We've had the sweet Beatitudes said. And then Jesus said, "Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets, but to fulfill them. For I truly tell you, until heaven and earth pass away, not one letter, not one stroke of a letter will pass from the law until all is accomplished. Therefore, whoever breaks one of the least of these commandments and teaches others to do the same will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever does them and teaches them will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I tell you, unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and the Pharisees, you will never enter. You have heard it was said of those ancient times, you shall not murder, and whoever murders shall be liable to judgment. But I say to you that if you are angry with a brother or sister, you will be liable to judgment. And if you insult a brother or sister, you will be liable to the council. And if you say, you fool, you will be liable to the hell of fire. So when you are offering your gift at the altar, if you remember that your brother and sister has something against you, leave your gift before the altar and go. And first be reconciled to your brother and sister, and then come and offer your gift." Lessons from Valentine's Day. The first lesson is, don't forget Valentine's Day. The second is, it is a matter of the heart. Jesus tells his disciples and those in the crowd gathered that day that he did not come to abolish the law and the prophets, but to fulfill them. Well, you look at that and you think, that's the most astonishing thing Jesus ever said, because we read about him constantly breaking the law, at least the law as the Jewish leaders interpreted it. But the law that Jesus is talking about is the Didacte, the 10 Commandments, as God handed them down. In the beginning, there were few rules and regulations. There were broad principles for the Jewish people to internalize and interpret for themselves with God's guidance. But as time goes by, things get more complicated. That's always true of groups and institutions. The principles were not enough. They argued that out of the law it was possible to deduce another law. Years ago, my daughter was considering going to law school, and she talked to an old friend of ours who had been in law a long time. And said, you know, is there always going to be opportunities out there? And he says, well, as long as Congress keeps passing laws, there's going to need to be lawyers. We keep passing laws, and we keep making more rules. And there were those in Jesus' time called the scribes, whose job it was to reduce the great principles of the 10 Commandments into thousands and thousands of tiny rules and regulations. And you know of the Pharisees, whose name means the separated ones, who had separated themselves from all the ordinary activities in order to keep the rules and the regulations. Well, the one great principle of which the commandments were based upon was that the Jews were to do God's will, and to do that will to the best of their ability. The 10 Commandments are based on obedience. And Christ even was obedient to the law and reduced the law to one word, and that word was love. Obedience is based on intellect, and love is based on emotion. And as important as obedience is, and intellect is, it is love that comes from the heart that truly carries the day. To look at our gospel passage today, it begins to make more sense that Jesus did not want to abolish the law, not one stroke, but we need to know which law he was talking about. On Friday, a lot of people in many places in the world celebrated the feast of Saint Valentine. You know, there was a Saint Valentine. Well, actually, there was more than one Saint Valentine, and there are a lot of traditions about who he was and what he did and why he was lifted up as a saint and why we practice this holiday as we do today. So one tradition of the many says that Valentine was a priest and he was martyred for his preaching about the year 269 in the Christian era. He was living near Rome. And there were at different times after the Christianity came to Rome and grew that Christians were persecuted. Sometimes not much, and sometimes there were waves of persecution. And during one of these persecutions, Valentine was arrested because he was a priest. And he was arrested for performing Christian marriages. He was brought before a judge who demanded that Valentine recognize the gods of Rome, which he didn't. And Valentine tried to convert the judge to Christianity, and the judge threw him into prison. But one of the guards was interested in Valentine, and the guard had a daughter, adopted daughter, who was blind, and he asked Valentine if God could heal his daughter. And Valentine prayed, and the girl was given sight. And the whole family, it said 46 people, came and praised God in the prison cell, and there was a baptism. And when Emperor Claudius II heard about this, he had enough of Valentine and ordered him to be killed. Before Valentine's death, he wrote a letter to that girl that God had healed, and he signed it, "From your Valentine." Now, that's a legend, and I don't know how much truth there is to it. But there was a priest named Valentine, and he lived during a time of persecution. And he apparently had a good bit of love in his heart to work and minister in those days. We like to think of Valentine's Day as reminding us of the value of unconditional love. That's kind of what Jesus was getting at in these words from Matthew. That keeping the law of God is really a matter of love, not following all the dots and tittles. Let me read something to you. 5 days after the accident on Memorial Weekend in 1995, I became fully conscious and able to make sense. Dr. Scott Henson and Dr. John Jane, Chief of Neurosurgery at the University of Virginia Hospital, explained my situation. They told me in detail about the extent of my injury and said that after the pneumonia cleared from my lungs, they would operate to reconnect my skull to the top of my spine. They did not know if the operation would be successful or even if I would survive it. They had a plan, but it was extremely risky and they needed my consent. My wife, Dana, had insisted, over the objections of some of her family, that the doctors discuss everything with me and that nothing be done without my permission. I answered somewhat vaguely, "Okay, whatever you have to do." Ever since childhood, I've been used to solving my problems. Whatever scrape I would get into, I was always sure of a way out. So I thought this was just another temporary problem. I needed surgery, but I'd be up and around, and before long, and the doctors left the room, and then I began to absorb what they had told me. This is a paralyzing injury. Dana came in the room. We made eye contact. I mouthed my first lucid words to her: "Maybe we should let me go." She said, "I'm only going to say this once. I will support whatever you want to do because this is your life and your decision, but I want you to know that I'll be with you for the long haul, no matter what." Then she added the words that saved my life: "You're still you, and I love you." If she had looked away or paused or hesitated even slightly, or if I had felt that there was sense of her being noble or fulfilling some obligation to me, I don't know if I could have pulled through. Because it had dawned on me that I had ruined my life and everyone else's. But Dana said what made living possible, because I felt the depth of her love and her commitment to me. These words were written in a biography by Christopher Reeve, the actor who played Superman, who was paralyzed from a fall from a horse 25 years ago and ultimately died of his condition. But that day, he knew that his wife's love for him was unconditional. And we proclaim that Christ's love for us is also unconditional. No matter what we have done in our lives, no matter how many wrongs we may have committed, got to sin first or you'll be forgiven, He will always welcome us back if only we have repentance. A lesson from Valentine's Day. We love through words, through cards, through actions, through special gifts. More than likely, we will not be called to be martyrs for our faith, as St. Valentine was. But all of us, sooner or later, get called to love in difficult circumstances. And we hope we are ready to make that sacrifice for one another. Do you like rules? Well, maybe if they favor us, sure. But generally, we don't like rules. It's hard to live your life for a rule. But for a principle, or for an idea, or for something that wells strongly in your heart, you can live for that. And Jesus reminded those who came to hear Him on that day that there is basically one rule, and that is the rule of love.